You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 60 of the DCAU Review. I'm Cal, and with me as he always is, DCAU Review Twitter guru, it's my good brother, Liam. Liam, it's episode 60, and it just so happens we have one of the best and most important episodes closing out the month of Superman that we've been doing here with a really good one.
Yeah, it actually ended up being, although it wasn't originally intended to be this way, ended up being the series finale, that being Legacy, parts 1 and 2. Originally this was planned to air earlier in the season and potentially, go on for a while. James Tucker actually recently responded to us on Twitter and was discussing it. Basically, the whole idea was that they always wanted that idea of the world kind of distrusting Superman to be in the Bible of the show, and they thought that this episode, which we'll get into the main plot in a second here, would sort of help further that story and would sort of be a theme for the rest of the series, would be him fighting to regain the trust of the people. But as things happen, production issues, and then this ended up being the last series. They weren't renewed after this season, so this ended up being the final episode. But it's a very newsworthy one, and a lot of the themes that were set up in this are followed up on later on in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited.
That's the cool part. You mentioned it was supposed to be earlier on. They were hoping to get it to play out in this series, but instead it just lays the groundwork for what would be the next series, and that being Justice League Unlimited, of course, and the general distrust. But it is an episode that takes the idea that seemingly modern-day Batman always has regarding Superman, and that is, what if... and it's been played out, we talked about this when we did Brave New Metropolis.
Yeah.
What would happen if Superman all of a sudden decided he used his powers for evil, or he used his powers to take over the world? And we'll get to the official synopsis in a second, but of course we find out that he's been brainwashed in this episode, so this isn't a case where Superman deciding of his own volition to
This isn't an injustice,
over.
or as you mentioned, a Brave New Metropolis situation, but...
He's manipulated into it at this point.
But it is that thing, and they play this out pretty well in Justice League. They kind of use Green Arrow as the voice of a lot of that feeling of who could stop him if he chose to start attacking the Earth.
Right. You have everybody else on Earth, in theory, doesn't come close to or compare to the power that Superman possesses.
Yeah.
And the invulnerability and everything he possesses. So yeah, that's something that, while we think, because we know he's a good, he's Superman, he's good, he desires to only do good, there's always going to be somebody that looks at it sideways or from a different point of view and says, but what if?
Right.
What if this were to happen? So let's get to our official synopsis for both of these episodes. It is a two-parter, Legacy Part 1 and 2, as you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
What are they?
So for Part 1, we have, and it reads as such, Superman is brainwashed to believe that he is the adopted son of Darkseid, and now he has orders to conquer Earth.
That breaks it down pretty succinctly. As we mentioned, he gets brainwashed, and Darkseid convinces him, and we'll talk about it in visuals and animation, but there's a cool sequence where they kind of show you what the brainwash sequence looks like. And
they redo shots from the pilot from Last Son of Krypton Part 2, I guess that would have been, of his teenage years and stuff, but now he's in this apocalyptic garb, and instead of flying through Kansas, he's flying through Apocalypse. It's really, really cleverly done.
Really, really well done, yeah. All right, so Part 2?
And then the synopsis for Part 2 reads as such. Now free of Darkseid's influence, but in U.S. military custody after being subdued, Superman breaks free to retaliate against the new god Despot.
There you go. And I gotta say, as far as the plot for this episode is concerned, and we get to the end of Part 1 comes where Superman finally recognizes Lois and seems to snap out of it. Lois is the person that seems to drag him out of his clouded... There was a series of events. Granny Goodness decides she's going to make his flag the Superman symbol. That triggers something. He's already been having these dreams where he sees he's fighting himself in the Superman garb.
Yeah.
Even though he doesn't recognize who it is, he sees Jimmy Olsen, he sees Lois, he sees these people clearly that were in his past. He doesn't recognize them. But then whatever happens, so there's something that triggers him to recognize Lois when she comes up, and Kara Supergirl is trying to figure out what's going on. They're fighting.
He's beating the tar out of Supergirl. Like, this episode is violent. These episodes are violent.
Very, very. They pushed the limit, I think, as far as what they could handle on a children's cartoon, or what the censors would allow. But yeah, I think that. So part 1 ends with him sort of coming out of the fog, but in custody. He's defeated. They shoot a kryptonite warhead type deal at him and Supergirl, and Lois is sort of also caught in the crossfire of that. So part 1 seems just like action, because it is Superman invading and Superman coming to Earth. It's Superman trying to take over. It's Superman battling against the army. It's Supergirl doing her best to try and battle back against Superman, and then the start of the second part rather is a little more slow. They're in custody. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. Lex is trying to convince the army to kill Superman.
Yes.
And then after that it's Superman's escape, and then really the final act of the show is Superman goes to Apocalypse and decides he's had enough.
Yes.
He's finished with the thread of Darkseid's reign over this entire series that we started covering a couple months ago when we did our monthly Superman
almost
there.
a year ago.
And now we're back here, and this is how they tied it up, at least in this series. Certainly Darkseid appears in Justice League. But yeah, I really, really liked it. I think the lull in the middle is what it needed. I think if it was because it was so action-packed in the first part, that they needed a little bit of break. I gave plot a perfect score, 10 out of 10. It's so well balanced. The ending isn't as satisfactory as you would hope. He doesn't kill Darkseid.
Yeah. And
I think, spoiler alert, the end of Justice League, the battle in Justice League Unlimited is much more satisfactory.
Yeah. The scale is also much larger. This feels more like sort of like maybe it's almost like comparing the lightsaber fights in the original Star Wars versus some of the more spectacular lightsaber fights in the prequels.
Sure.
That's doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other. It's just they're kind of going for different emotions.
Yep, absolutely. So 10 out of 10 for my score. What did you think of the plot? Yeah,
I also gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. I think it's such a great story. We talked about it all throughout the series. As you mentioned, Darkseid has sort of loomed over as this large threat, and that line that he tells him in Apocalypse Now, "If you will not be my knight, you will be my pawn," comes to fruition here, where using Granny Goodness, he's able to hypnotize him, send him to Earth. He's also very clever to make sure there's no apocalyptian flags flying when the invasion happens, so it doesn't violate the treaty with New Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very he's such a manipulative guy, and to have that all come to a head, and of course you have the scene of Superman takes Supergirl to Star Labs. She's very badly injured. Professor Hamilton doesn't want to help because he's Superman at the very least is a fugitive, and it seems that they've sort of branded Supergirl with the same brush, whether she deserves it or not, which obviously she didn't. But and Superman has to sort of threaten Professor Hamilton, and of course that's a huge plot thread that comes back in Justice League Unlimited down the line. But and then yes, you get to that final battle where he tears through Apocalypse. He incinerates a bunch of parademons.
So great.
You see the fire shoot out of his eyes, and then it flashes to just Darkseid watching the sky, and you see the clouds are glowing red, and it's so incredible. And we're getting into visuals a little bit here, but it builds to this, and he tears through the Furies. He beats the piss out of Calabac for old time's sake.
Goodness.
And Granny, he damn near tortures Granny Goodness, throws her in the same machine that she was using to wipe his memory, and sort of fries her brain. And then they have this. He and Darkseid finally have it's the first time that we'd ever gotten to see Darkseid do anything besides sort of stand very stoically and fire those lasers out of his eyes. To see Darkseid throw punches and take punches, and and they have this big battle. And as you mentioned, it's not like a super satisfying ending here. Mm-hmm. And if this is where the universe is ended, I think maybe the score is a little lower, because it's kind of, he throws Darkseid's half-dead carcass at the feet of these slaves on Apocalypse, and the slaves all slowly pick him up and take him to get medical attention, and he tells Superman that he's God on Apocalypse, and it's sort of this like downer note, and Superman almost goes to go after him again, and Supergirl convinces him not to, because that would make him the same,
right?
Which is Darkseid,
which is bringing Superman back to, hey, just because he turned you into or brainwashed you into that isn't who you really are.
Yes.
Don't forget who you really actually are, which isn't that type of person.
Yeah, and then that's a good Superman way. Like, even though it's not a super happy ending, because you don't get the Darkseid doesn't get his comeuppance here, it's a good Superman way to be like, look, you made your point, you beat his ass, and now it's time to go home. And he has his final scene on the roof of the Daily Planet with Lois, and they share their first kiss in the entire DCAU. And again, you could tell they were setting up for things down the line. And again, a lot of this stuff, including some of Superman and Lois's relationship, gets to play out in Justice League. So I think the existence of a continuation, even though it wasn't in maybe the way the creators of this show thought it was going to be, really does help, and it really does make this a really special show. So, yeah, 10 out of 10.
Absolutely. And one minor other thing, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, when we get to voice acting, but
the
fact they were able to weave Lex so pivotal.
Yes!
Lex had a very pivotal part in this episode, Lex being the person that is ironically getting his wish in all of this, too, in trying to kill Superman,
yes,
but doing it under the guise of being a patriot is just, it's just an excellent second, third layer to this episode. It works really well. All right, let's move on. We can talk about that for probably another hour or so, but let's move on to music. Liam, I thought music was pretty strong in this episode. There's not a lot of super memorable notes. I think there's a couple of variations of the Superman theme that they did well. They play off the Superman theme, at least when he's under the influence or under the brainwash of Darkseid. They do a couple variations of the Superman theme, and then when they're escaping the government facility, there's a couple of variations of the Supergirl, the Superman theme. Are played in minor keys. They're played in a little bit different way, a little more sinister way when he's Darkseid's pawn, and a little bit concerning.
Like, solemn, or when they show Supergirl sort of on the hospital table, you hear her theme played very like somber and softly. It's really, really effective for taking those existing themes, and we've talked about that before, of taking these themes and you don't just hear them one way, to hear these themes played in a different way to evoke a different emotion from you. It's really, really effectively done, I thought, especially in this episode. I gave music 8 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, I gave music a 7 out of 10, so I'm right there with you. I think that final scene, it's emotional enough. It didn't seem like they leaned into music too much in the battle between Superman and Darkseid.
Yeah,
it's there, but I think that it didn't need to be. So for what it was, I think it was really good. Next category, we'll talk about animation and visuals. Liam, I think this episode is very solid. There is a couple nitpicky things. There's a couple scenes where Darkseid's there was one scene that I noticed that they showed Darkseid's face, and he was missing the details of his kind of his forehead, how he has those divots in his forehead. There's a scene that was pretty close up too, and for whatever reason they missed the detail on that. I'm a little nitpicky in this area for this episode, just because everything else is so good.
Sure.
So I figure I have to be a little bit more critical in this area. I think the color tones in certain scenes are a little bit. It's just different. I think because they have the red lights of the red sun rays that they use to dampen Supergirl and Superman's powers. That sort of dampens things. They're also inside a lot, which is hit or miss sometimes depending on how things look. With that said, I think it's really, really strong. I love the visual of the costume that they gave Clark or Superman as the Son of Apocalypse costume, the helmet, the fact that he still used the heat vision out of it. That whole opening sequence, by the way,
where it's you just see the Apocalypse like tanks and parademons raining down on this alien race, and Superman is wearing this helmet with the horns on. It kind of looks like the comic book version of Steppenwolf.
Correct.
And you just see him raining down. Really, all the initial visual clue that it's Superman is that he's using heat vision, but you just see him sort of just tearing through this army, and then you know at the end you see him take off the helmet for the big reveal, and it's really well done. But yeah, that whole opening sequence is really quite well done.
Yeah, so for that reason, those were the things that I really liked about this. That final battle between him and Darkseid is great too. His costume gets ripped up. There's blood.
Yeah,
Darkseid's face getting messed up after his Omega beams are turned back towards his own face, and really, really cool visual with that. I gave it a very strong 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it another perfect 10 out of 10. I think it's so well done. Even some of the minor stuff, like in the opening of the episode where Supergirl is piloting these Superman and Clark Kent drone robots to try to keep up the appearances that he's still around while he's been off on Apocalypse, and Lex uses some sort of device to make a Superman robot malfunction, and it's just flying through the city, smashing through buildings and paintings and just causing havoc. And I thought that sequence was really well done. There's a couple of shots where Supergirl is in the Fortress of Solitude looking at a screen, and you kind of see a first-person view of the robot flying through the city. I thought that was really well done. And as I mentioned, and as you have as well, the final sequence where from the moment he shows up on Apocalypse to fight those parademons, to the stuff with Granny, to the battle with the Furies, he like flies through a fire pit and just keeps flying fast, and there's fire all around him, and then the fire peels off, and then all of the Furies fall off of him.
That was a good shot.
Because you just have him going, he's just going so fast.
Even before that, so when he decides he's going to Apocalypse, the scene where before he enters the boom tube, Lois comes up to him, and all it is shadow.
Yeah.
And you see the outline is around them is lit, but you can't see their eyes. There's no facial features. It's just it looked like directly out of a comic book.
Yeah.
Right? And then when he arrives on Apocalypse, he's still lit the same way, where you see the parademons coming at him, but he's completely in shadow until his eyes light up and the heat vision shoots out. Yeah, that is really good.
And as you mentioned, the dream sequence in part 1, when he's sort of first having doubts about who he is, and he fights the real Superman in his brain, and that's all in shadow for a moment, and then eventually Superman steps out of the shadow and he sees that it's him, and it's this it's really, really well done. And I probably could have nitpicked it a little bit, but I just tried to go with my first instinct there, and it's really, really stunning. And that final battle with Darkseid there's so much personal stakes to it as well, and we'll get to that in voice acting as well. Superman sort of just lists all of the terrible things Darkseid has done to him personally and to his friends and the Earth, and then they just unleash on each other. It's so well done.
Yeah, I agree. All right, last category of the day, Liam, is our voice actors. We got a whole returning cast here, and it's an all-star cast, baby.
Yeah, other than the only really new player is Charles Napier as General Hardcastle, who of course comes back later on in Justice League Unlimited in the Galatea episode. But other than that, it's, as you mentioned, an all-star cast. You of course have Dana Delaney as Lois Lane, who plays a huge part of it. She's so good.
She's so good in this episode.
One of her best, I think, of the that we've reviewed to date. And you have David Kaufman as Jimmy Olsen. You have returning Michael Dorn as Calabac. You have, of course, Nicole Thomas Supergirl, who has a big part to play in this. My recollection of this episode was I did not remember how much Supergirl was in this and how sort of integral she is.
She really is. She's the reason why Superman decides to go back to Apocalypse.
Yes,
basically. He sees her on her deathbed.
Yeah, she's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, where he can no longer stand to let Darkseid just kind of sit on this, on his throne.
He's going on the offense. He's tired of playing defense.
But I thought Nicole Tom did a great job in this episode. Good. And then, of course, you have Ed Asner as Granny, who's just such, as we said it when we reviewed Little Girl Lost earlier this month, just a delight. You have a smile on your face the whole time. She's on the screen.
Hashtag Ed Asner for Granny, by the way.
Absolutely. Live action. Sign our petition. I will have tweeted it out by now, but right. Yes, he is so great as Granny, and again, really playing that, all this flowery, maternal language and then it's undercut by the real sinister, creepy side of Granny, and
yep.
And then, of course, the GOAT, call him the GOAT for a reason, Michael Ironside as Darkseid. It's the Joker is a different type of villain, so I don't think it's really fair to compare them as far as who's the greatest DCAU villain. But as far as the biggest of the big bads, the galaxy-spanning threats, it's you don't get better than Darkseid, I think, in the DCAU. And Michael Ironside in this episode is so good. From the part 1 where he's playing proud dad of his conquering hero son.
Really good.
To, once Superman leaves to conquer Earth, he's talking about how he and Granny are talking about how, either the Earth will be destroyed or Superman will be destroyed. And so it's either way they win. And in the chaos, Darkseid will come to Earth to give them guidance. And that's a way he can avoid. He's so good at finding ways to not break that treaty with New Genesis that they set up, and I appreciate that level of continuity.
Yep.
And they're every time we've seen Darkseid since Apocalypse Now, he's justified why he's not the one really doing the invading. He's not the one making the destruction happen. He's just he can always play himself off as sort of a passive force, and it's just the master chess player there is really well done, and Michael Ironside's performance is such a huge part of that.
He does so great too. I know we both appreciate the fact that he just hates Calabac so much. He doesn't miss a chance to put him down.
I can't believe we're relaed by blood or
Superman
something.
busts in and knocks out Calabac with one punch, and he said, I can't believe that he's blood. When he's looking out and watching the clouds glow red as Superman's just eviscerating the army of parademons, he delivers, the prodigal son is returned.
Yes.
So good. Yes, greatest as far as galaxy-threatening villains. Flip side, I mentioned it briefly before, but Clancy Brown, man.
Oh, he's
holy
tremendous.
Moly, he's great in this episode. There's a great interaction. He has a lot of interaction with General Hardcastle, being the guy in his ear that's, we have to kill Superman, we have to do it now, we have to put this to an end. And their interactions together are extremely good. There's some Superman interacting with Lex where Superman finally gets to punch Lex in the face.
Superman's under the red sun, so he doesn't have to worry about, crushing him.
So that was so satisfying.
Which is also paid off at the end when Lex has his jaw wired shut as he's being interviewed by the TV cameras.
Really, 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 really good. So Liam, I don't know how you can't give this a 10. I gave 10 out of 10 for voice acting.
Yeah, and I also gave voice acting 10 out of 10. And of course, I haven't actually mentioned him as of yet, but Tim Daly, I think this is obviously one of his best episodes as Superman. It ended up being, for the time being, his final appearance as Superman. Mm-hmm. He's obviously come back quite a few times over the years to voice him for various animated movies and a couple of video games. So, we've gone back and forth a few times about the New Byrne versus Daly, but I'm okay with letting him coexist.
Yeah,
Tim Daly in this episode, there's a great back and forth between him and Darkseid where he punches Darkseid and says, "That was for Dan Turpin."
I was about to bring that up. It's so funny you said that.
And
that's for Dan Turpin. Who? The good man you murdered.
Had I known one human's death would pain you so, I would have killed more.
And Darkseid says, if I knew killing one human was going to bother you so much, I would have killed more.
It's so good.
It's so well done, and that's credit to the writers who are Paul Dini and Rich Fogel wrote both parts of this, by the way. It's a great line, and it's delivered. The back and forth between Tim Daly and Michael Ironside is so good. And in that final scene, it's Luke Skywalker and the Emperor. It's that type of just visceral hatred between this force of good and this completely evil but almost untouchable foe.
It's it's fantastic. So I guess, Liam, that brings us to our final scores. And that, totaling mine up, I come up with a final score of 35 out of 40, which, going back to last week, bad episode jar, it's funny, the same two guys that wrote that episode also wrote this episode. So as much crap as we gave Fogel and Dini for last week's episode, this week's episode is, again, in the upper echelon of the Superman episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was your final score?
And my final score is a very, very strong 38 out of 40. This is a rarefied air.
I was going to say that's not only is that top Superman episode, it's probably top 5 episodes we've done so far.
I think so. So
out of 60, not too many are in those upper 30s, almost touching 40, close to perfect. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
Rewatch. I don't think there's any question.
100%.
Watch this episode. You can't skip this episode.
Even if it didn't connect into Justice League and all that, it would still be a great watch just because of it does work as a finale in the sense that it does make sense that Superman versus Darkseid would sort of be the final conflict of the series after it had been set up for so long.
Yep.
And like I said, it's just such a great performances from the voice cast. It's wonderful animation, wonderful visuals. It's well written. It's everything. The music is fantastic. It's everything about these that makes these cartoons so great. The reason we do this podcast, the reason we've been fans for so long, it's all of those elements coming together to, if it's not perfect, it's darn near perfect. So
I would agree. Yeah, don't skip this episode ever. If you're watching through it. So definitely check it out. Well, thank you everybody for listening. That wraps up our month of June here. We're crazy thing feels like we just started the month of June, Liam.
No kidding.
But we are already through the month of June. We're starting a new month next week. Liam, do you want to give them a little preview of what we're going to be starting next week?
Yeah, well, as we have been alluding to throughout this episode and how there are threads followed up on in future series, next week we are starting, for the first time, we'll be reviewing episodes from the second season of Justice League. Still not doing Unlimited yet, but we're going to start in the second season, and we're going to be starting with that Season 2 premiere, which is Twilight Parts 1 and 2, which happens to feature a little character called Darkseid, also Brainiac, a lot of Superman the Animated Series follow-up packed into that episode Twilight. So really excited to get back into Justice League, look at some of those awesome Season 2 episodes as we keep rolling through.
Awesome. Cannot wait. Don't forget, check out DCAUreview.com. We have the whole archive up there. You can check out our past episodes where we covered episodes with Darkseid, our past episodes with Lex, and some of our other favorite top-ranked episodes. Have to put a new category in there for our top-ranked episodes, too. So definitely check that out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Google Podcasts, to name a few. Also, don't forget, check Liam out. He's our Twitter guru. Check him out at DCAU Review. Tweet at him. Give us your thoughts of this. How do you like Legacy? What are your thoughts on this story? How do you feel about us moving towards some more Justice League?
Where does Darkseid rank on your personal DCAU villain list?
Yeah, that's a darn good question right there. We'd love to hear your thoughts, but send all your feedback to Liam at DCAU Review on Twitter. So until next week, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.